Generally, when you discuss the idea of a hydrogen, there are three types of hydrogen. Right? One is called as a gray hydrogen, second one is a blue hydrogen, and the third one is a green hydrogen. Now, these three are very often there in the newspapers. The basic idea of this particular type of a hydrogen is that the green hydrogen is environment friendly, is produced through electrolysis, and there is no emissions which will cause harm to the environment. Whereas when you talk of gray hydrogen, there are certain emissions which are caused, right? And this will cause harm to the environment. Whereas in the context of blue hydrogen, emission is there, but we generally sequester it, store it, or basically capture it as a result of this. Between blue and the gray, blue is less harmful to the environment. Now, in the context of Indian economy, in the last couple of years, Government of India has been promoting more and more production of green hydrogen. All of this particular discussion started in one of the announcements are done by the Prime Minister of India during the Independence Day, when the Prime Minister basically stated that Government of India will be producing a huge amount of hydrogen, and India will not be just the producer of the green hydrogen, we will also become the exporter of hydrogen. And keeping in mind all of these particular announcements, Government of India put forward a target of 5 million tons of hydrogen production in case of India itself. Now, one more very important point you need to understand in the context of hydrogen is, India is heavily dependent on import of fuels. Is it okay? India is heavily dependent on the import of fuels. For example, in the context of crude oil, generally we'll say that around 85% of the requirement or the domestic demand, we actually import it. And what about the gas? The gas requirement, around 50% plus of the gas requirement in the domestic market, we actually import it. Look at all of this particular energy dependence on India on the international market. In the budget for 21 and 22, Finance Minister emphasized on promotion of green hydrogen. And looking at all of this, government now has announced that the green hydrogen policy will be initiated or implemented in two phases. In the first phase or in the first round of green hydrogen policy, 10 announcements have been made, which we'll discuss in a minute. And in the coming days, another round or the second round of green hydrogen policy would be announced. Now, what are the important points in this particular policy? Have a look at these particular important points here. First one is, the producer of green hydrogen can basically source the renewable energy from the market. There is a market for electricity which is called as a power exchange market. So the producer of green hydrogen can essentially purchase the renewable energy that they require from the power exchange itself. That is first very important point. Now some of you might be thinking, sir, what is the importance here? Rather than procuring it, or let's say rather than purchasing this particular electricity from, let's say, a DISCOM, that is a distribution company, I'll be purchasing from the market itself. Right? That is the advantage, or that is the point related to the first announcement. Second very important point. Government has announced that it will provide open access to these particular manufacturers. Now you'll simply have a question, sir, what do you mean by open access? The concept of open access was announced by the government back in the year back in the concept of Electricity Act of 2003. Is it okay? Electricity Act of 2003. And what is the idea of open access here? Imagine I'm one of the manufacturers in the market, or let's say producers in the market. I require huge amount of electricity. Rather than purchasing it from, let's say, the DISCOM or getting it from DISCOM, I will go to the electricity market or the power exchange, purchase it from there. But now the question arises, when I purchase it, how do I get it transferred to my manufacturing facility? Because generally the electricity infrastructure that has been developed is owned by the government. That is, let's say in simple terms, the wiring which is used to transfer electricity. So when they talk about open access, it simply means that you as a consumer of electricity, you can use this particular infrastructure which is already set up by the government and get it transferred, right, from one point, let's say from the producer to your factory gate. That is a basic idea for open access. And the government now says, under the hydrogen policy, we will provide the manufacturers the concept of open access within 15 days of application. And not just this, the government also has stated that the interstate transmission charges will be waived off, not just for 1 year or 2 years, but for in fact 25 years. Now what is this interstate transmission charges? Whenever you are moving the electricity from one point to another point, you could be moving the electricity within one state, or you could be moving this particular electricity across the state borders as such. And when you move this particular electricity across the state border, this is called as interstate electricity transportation. And when you move the electricity across the border like this, there are certain charges which are imposed by the central government. And when you move the electricity within one state, then the state government will impose charges, and that is called as intrastate electricity. Is it okay? Between two states, right? Interstate, and within one state, intrastate. So the central government which imposes the charges on interstate transmission, it has stated that to these particular producers who are going to purchase the electricity, use it for production of green hydrogen, for for 25 years, for the tenure of 25 years, government would not be imposing any of these particular transportation charges or transmission charges. What is the importance here? Right? Have a look at this particular example. Imagine here is the person who is consuming electricity. This electricity is supplied to this particular person by, let's say, a DISCOM. The DISCOM would have purchased electricity from a producer. So whenever the producer will transfer or the generator will transfer electricity to the DISCOM like this, if it is within the same state, intrastate transportation or transmission charges are imposed. And when the producer, that is a generation company, is from another state and the DISCOM is from another state, then the central government will impose interstate transmission charges. And they generally add to the cost of acquisition, cost of purchasing for the DISCOM. And when the DISCOM will supply the same electricity to the producer, or let's say the company here, the charges which are imposed by this particular DISCOM is inclusive of the interstate or intrastate transmission charges which are paid by this particular DISCOM. Now, if these particular charges are waived off, and please understand this very carefully, although I'm saying if these charges are waived off, right now, only the central government has waived off interstate transmission charges. As of now, state governments have not yet announced a waiver of this particular intrastate transmission charges. So when the central government waives off such transmission charges, the cost of acquiring or the cost of acquiring such electricity for the green hydrogen producer would become lesser. And when the cost of acquisition becomes lesser, automatically the cost of production of hydrogen will also become lesser. And that is one very important point here. Why? Generally, when you discuss the green hydrogen, one of the issues related to green hydrogen in case of India has been that the cost of producing green hydrogen is higher. Generally, they will give a range between 200 plus rupees to up to 400 plus rupees. So cost of producing green hydrogen is very, very high in India. And by providing these kinds of measures or reforms, Government of India wants to ensure that the cost of production of hydrogen will automatically come down. And when the cost of production comes down, the market prices, at what price these are sold in the market, will automatically come down. So absorption or usage of such type of energy will automatically start increasing. That is the important application of this particular announcement.